My stepdaughter tried to sabotage my honeymoon and even tried to delete my unborn baby, then she ran away from home and confessed to trying to end my pregnancy, saying that I was trying to replace her mom. I, 28F, have been married to my husband Eric, 32M, for about 6 months now. We dated for 3 years before getting married. Eric has a daughter, Renee, 16F, from his previous marriage. His ex-wife passed away when Renee was 8, so it's been just the two of them for a long time. When Eric and I first started dating, I tried really hard to connect with Renee. I knew it might be difficult for her to accept someone new in her dad's life, so I wanted to make sure she felt comfortable. But from the beginning, Renee was cold towards me. She'd give me dirty looks, make snide comments, and generally try to make me feel unwelcome. I talked to Eric about it a few times early on. He told me Renee had behaved similarly with his previous girlfriends, and that he'd tried talking to her about it but nothing seemed to change. He said she was still dealing with losing her mom and asked me to be patient. So for the next 3 years, I did my best to ignore Renee's behavior and just focus on my relationship with Eric. It wasn't easy, but I really cared about Eric and wanted things to work. I kept hoping Renee would eventually come around. When Eric proposed, I was thrilled. But I was also nervous about how Renee would react. To my surprise, she seemed okay with it at the wedding. She wasn't exactly warm towards me, but she wasn't openly hostile either. I started to think maybe things were finally changing. A month after the wedding, Eric and I were planning our honeymoon to Greece. We'd be gone for 2 weeks. A few days before we were set to leave, Renee asked if she could come along. She said she was really interested in Greek history and culture. Eric and I discussed it and decided to let her come. I thought it could be a good bonding opportunity. We'd do some activities all together, but Eric and I would also have plenty of alone time. The first few days of the trip went okay. We did some sightseeing as a group. Renee still wasn't super friendly towards me, but she wasn't being openly rude either. I started to relax a bit. On the 4th day, Eric and I had planned a romantic dinner date. Renee said she was going to stay at the hotel and order room service. When we got back from dinner, we found Renee in our hotel room. She claimed she'd gotten locked out of her own room and the front desk couldn't help her. I was annoyed, but tried to be understanding. We let her sleep on the pull-out couch in our room. The next morning, I woke up feeling really sick. I was nauseous and had terrible stomach cramps. Eric wanted to take me to a doctor, but I insisted I just needed to rest. I spent most of the day in bed while Eric and Renee went sightseeing. That evening, I was feeling a bit better and decided to join them for dinner. We went to a nice restaurant near our hotel. Halfway through the meal, I started feeling sick again. I excused myself to go to the bathroom. As I was walking back to the table, I overheard Renee talking to Eric. She was saying how much fun she was having with just the two of them, and how she wished it could always be like this. I felt hurt and angry, but I didn't say anything. I just went back to the table and tried to act normal. The next day, I was still feeling under the weather. Eric suggested he and Renee go on a day trip they'd planned while I rested. I agreed, thinking the alone time might help me feel better. While they were gone, I decided to do some laundry. As I was gathering clothes, I noticed an empty bottle of laxatives in Renee's suitcase. Suddenly, everything clicked. My illness, Renee's comments at dinner, it all made sense. I confronted Renee when she and Eric got back. At first, she denied everything. But when I said I'd found the laxative bottle, she broke down and admitted what she'd done. She said she just wanted some time alone with her dad like it used to be. Eric was furious. He immediately booked Renee a flight home and told her she was grounded indefinitely. He apologized to me profusely and offered to cut our trip short, but I said we should try to enjoy the rest of our honeymoon. The last week of the trip was tense. Eric was angry and upset about what Renee had done. I was hurt and struggling to process everything. We tried to make the best of it, but it wasn't the romantic honeymoon we planned. When we got home, Eric sat Renee down for a long talk. He told her that her behavior was completely unacceptable and there would be serious consequences. He took away her phone and computer and said she was grounded for the foreseeable future. It's been a few weeks now, and things are still really tense at home. Renee barely speaks to either of us. Eric is trying to figure out how to move forward. I'm struggling with how to feel about Renee now. Part of me understands she's a teenager dealing with a lot of emotions, but another part of me is furious at what she did. I don't know how to move past this. I want to have a good relationship with my stepdaughter, but I don't know if that's possible now. Eric and I are both stressed, and it's putting a strain on our new marriage. I could really use some advice on how to handle this situation. It's been about 3 weeks since my last post, and things have gotten even more complicated. A few days after I posted, Eric and I sat down with Renee to try and have a calm discussion about everything that had happened. We wanted to understand why she did what she did and figure out how we could all move forward. At first, Renee was very defensive. She insisted that she hadn't meant to hurt me, that it was just a prank that went too far. Eric and I tried to explain how serious her actions were, how she could have really harmed my health. After a lot of back and forth, Renee finally broke down. She admitted that she'd been feeling really angry and hurt ever since Eric and I got married. She said she felt like I was trying to replace her mom and that Eric didn't care about her anymore. I was shocked. I had no idea Renee felt that way. I tried to assure her that I wasn't trying to replace her mom, that I just wanted us all to be a family. Eric also reassured her that he loved her just as much as ever. We talked for hours, with lots of tears on all sides. By the end, it felt like we'd made some progress. Renee apologized sincerely for what she'd done on the trip. We agreed to start family therapy to work on our issues. I really thought things were going to get better after that. But about a week later, everything fell apart again. I came home early from work one day and found Renee going through my things in my bedroom. She was reading my journal and looking through my personal documents. When I confronted her, she tried to lie at first. But when I said I caught her red-handed, she got angry. She started yelling at me, saying I had no right to privacy in her house. She said her dad had told her she could go through my things. I was furious and hurt. I called Eric immediately and told him what happened. He came home right away and was livid when he heard what Renee had done. He assured me he had never given Renee permission to go through my things. Eric tried to talk to Renee, but she locked herself in her room and refused to come out. She stayed in there all night, ignoring our attempts to talk to her. The next morning, Renee was gone. She'd climbed out her window in the middle of the night and run away. She left a note saying she couldn't live with us anymore and was going to stay with her aunt, Eric's sister. Eric and I were frantic. We called the police and spent hours driving around looking for her. Finally, late that night, Eric's sister called. Renee was safe at her house. Eric went to pick her up, but Renee refused to come home. She said she wanted to live with her aunt from now on. Eric's sister agreed to let Renee stay for a while until things calmed down. It's been 2 weeks now, and Renee is still at her aunt's house. Eric goes to see her every day, but she still refuses to come home. She says she hates me and doesn't want to live with me. I'm at a loss. I feel like everything I've tried to do to connect with Renee has backfired. Eric is stressed and upset, caught between his daughter and his wife. I don't know what to do anymore. Should I suggest that Eric let Renee live with her aunt permanently? Should I be the one to move out? I love Eric, but I don't know how much more of this I can take. Update 2. It's been about 2 months since my last update, and a lot has happened. After Renee ran away to her aunt's house, Eric and I had a lot of long, difficult conversations. We both agreed that we couldn't continue living like this. Something had to change. We decided to try family therapy again, this time including Eric's sister in some of the sessions. It was hard at first. Renee was still very angry and resistant to the idea of coming home. But slowly, over several weeks of therapy, things started to improve. Renee began to open up more about her feelings. She talked about how much she missed her mom and how scared she was of losing her dad too. I realized that in my efforts to bond with Renee, I'd been trying too hard to be her friend. What she really needed was for me to respect her relationship with her dad and give her space to grieve her mom. Eric also recognized that he needed to set clearer boundaries with Renee and be more consistent in his parenting. He'd been so worried about hurting her that he'd let her get away with too much. After about a month of therapy, Renee agreed to come home for a trial period. We set up some new house rules and expectations for everyone. It wasn't easy, but we all tried our best to make it work. Things were going okay for a while. Not perfect, but better than before. Renee and I were at least being civil to each other, and she seemed to be adjusting to being back home. But then, about 2 weeks ago, everything changed again. I got a call from my doctor's office. They wanted me to come in to discuss some test results. I hadn't told Eric or Renee that I'd been to the doctor recently, so I was a bit nervous. When I got to the doctor's office, I received some shocking news. I'm pregnant. About 8 weeks along. I was stunned. Eric and I hadn't been planning on having kids anytime soon. We'd talked about it and agreed to wait a few years. I was on birth control, so I didn't think this was even possible. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was excited. I've always wanted to be a mom. But another part of me was terrified. How would this affect things with Renee? We'd just started to make progress, and now everything was going to change again. I decided to tell Eric first before saying anything to Renee. When I told him that night, he was shocked too. But after the initial surprise wore off, he seemed happy about it. He hugged me and said we'd figure it out together. We agreed to wait a bit before telling Renee. We wanted to process the news ourselves first and come up with a plan for how to tell her. But life had other plans. A few days later, Renee overheard me on the phone with my sister, talking about the pregnancy. She burst into my room, furious that we'd kept it from her. She started yelling about how I was trying to replace her, how the baby would ruin everything. Then she said something that stopped me cold. She said, "I knew you were pregnant. I saw the test in the trash. That's why I put those pills in your food on the honeymoon. I was trying to make you delete the baby." Eric, who had come running when he heard the yelling, looked horrified. Renee seemed to realize what she'd said and tried to take it back, but it was too late. Eric told Renee to go to her room while he and I talked. We were both in shock. We couldn't believe Renee would do something so dangerous and cruel. We're at a loss now. Renee's actions were so much worse than we thought. She didn't just try to make me sick, she tried to unalive my baby. Even though she didn't know for sure I was pregnant, the intent was there. Eric is devastated. He keeps saying he doesn't know who Renee is anymore. I'm scared and angry and don't know how to move forward. How can I ever trust Renee again? How can I feel safe having a baby in the same house as her? We're considering sending Renee to boarding school or to live with her aunt permanently. But I know that will hurt Eric deeply. He loves Renee so much, despite everything she's done. But we both agree that we can't continue like this. It's not safe for me or the baby. We've called Renee's therapist and scheduled an emergency session. We're also looking into residential treatment programs for teens with behavioral issues. It feels like a drastic step, but we don't know what else to do at this point. I'm struggling with a lot of conflicting emotions. I'm excited about the baby, but also terrified. I'm angry at Renee, but also sad for her. I love Eric, but I'm also resentful that his daughter has caused so much chaos in our lives. I don't know what the future holds for our family. I just know that something has to change, and soon. Update 3. It's been about 6 months since my last update, and a lot has changed in our lives. After Renee's confession about trying to unalive the baby, Eric and I made the difficult decision to send her to a residential treatment program. It was heartbreaking, but we felt it was necessary for everyone's safety and well-being. Renee has been in the program for about 5 months now. It hasn't been easy, but we're starting to see some positive changes. She's been working with therapists to deal with her grief over her mom's passing and her anger issues. She's also been diagnosed with depression and is on medication now. Eric visits her every week, and I go with him about once a month. Our visits were tense at first, but they're slowly getting better. Renee has apologized several times for her behavior, especially for trying to harm me and the baby. I'm not ready to forgive her completely, but I can see that she's genuinely trying to change. As for me, I'm now 7 months pregnant. Despite the stress of everything that's happened, the pregnancy has been going well. Eric and I found out we're having a boy. We're excited but also nervous about how this will affect our family dynamics. We've been going to couples therapy to work on our relationship and prepare for the baby. It's been helpful in dealing with the stress of the past year and in learning how to communicate better. We've also been working with Renee's treatment team to prepare for her eventual return home. They've recommended a step-down program where she'll live in a supervised group home for a few months before coming back to live with us. We think this will be a good transition and give everyone time to adjust. I'm still struggling with trust issues when it comes to Renee. The thought of her being around the baby makes me anxious. But I'm trying to take it one day at a time and trust in the progress she's making. Eric has been my rock through all of this. He's been supportive and understanding, even when I've had moments of doubt about our future. I know this has been incredibly hard on him too, being torn between his daughter and his wife and unborn child. We don't know exactly what the future holds, but we're committed to making it work. We're taking things slowly and focusing on healing as individuals and as a family. I want to thank everyone who's offered advice and support throughout this journey. It's been a difficult road, but I'm hopeful that we're moving in the right direction. I'll update again after the baby is born and when Renee is closer to coming home.